Welcome to Commander Central, episode 191, and today we'll be looking at listener Mason Talley's Borborygmos Enraged deck. I'm Dana.
And I'm Max.
Hey, Max. How you doing this fine quarantine Thursday?
Is it Thursday?
Well, I guess this is airing on a Thursday. We're recording on Tuesday.
Don't do that. All the days look the same now, Dana.
They really do. It's very confusing.
I go to bed and my office is right there. I wake up and my office is right there. I don't spend a lot of time in my bedroom anymore just because of that fact.
We have a fairly nice hiking trail right near my house that we can jump on, and it loops through like this, wooded area, and it comes out at the university. And campus is empty because everyone's home, obviously. So then, I can walk that trail and not really encounter anybody. Then we can walk through campus, which is empty, and then, loop back through to my house and not really have to walk close to anybody. And it's a nice hike to get some fresh air and get away from the house. So yesterday, we went a couple of times earlier over the weekend, and it winds up being like a 4 to 5 mile-ish trek. So we went a few times over the weekend, and then I actually put on a newish pair of hiking shoes that I've been wearing around the house just to break them in. And I hadn't been wearing those, and I put them on Monday, and literally at the halfway mark, I started getting just ginormous blisters on both my heels from the shoes just weren't broken in. So
oh, no.
I had to take them off and walk the last 2-ish miles back home. Because at that point, it was like literally at the point where you could, turning back didn't make a difference. It was either direction I went was the same distance to my house. So I walked in my socks for the last 2 miles. And then I'm like, well, I guess I'm just not going to walk for the next, week till that heals up. But I was just going stir crazy today after, again, being in the house all day and, not seeing the sun. I'm like, and it was kind of nice out. I'm like, I need to go outside and do something. So we went again. And now I've, of course, blown both those blisters open. And I'm like, well, now I'm definitely not going to heal up for how long. So I'm going to see how long I can continue to make this a wound that never heals on both my feet, just because I need to get out of the house. I just needed to go for a walk.
Oh, wow.
So that's how exciting life is right now in quarantine, talking about blisters on my feet.
Yeah, you win the argument this week. You get the point.
For most horrifyingly boring conversation.
Yeah, I can't top that.
Have you really been leaving the house for anything at all?
We left the house today, in fact, to
nice.
Get lunch.
Okay.
We did a local eatery, support local.
Picked up something?
Yep, I was an idiot and forgot to bring the rent check with me to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, so I'll get to leave the house tomorrow.
All right, well, there you go.
It's very quickly. We are in and out.
Sure.
We don't stay out long.
Yeah, and luckily, in the town we're in, there's not been very many cases. So you feel like, if you need to go to the grocery store, you need to go do whatever, you're 99.9% safe. I'm not crazy worried about it like I would be if I was in New York or Seattle or something where, you just definitely don't want to come into contact with anything or anyone. But still, it's not worth the risk.
Definitely not. And we're very fortunate to be in an area with not very many cases, like you said. And
yeah.
Ooh.
So this show's going to air on Thursday. We'll have Ikoria previews. This usually goes live in the morning, 6 a.m.-ish, 6 to 7. But I think Ikoria previews are able to start being released on Thursday, so there might already be a few in the wild. And if not, shortly after this show goes out, they'll be starting to trickle in. And then over the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, is when all of the Commander deck cards will be previewed, including 3 cards that we have that we just recorded a little video for that will be out on, I think we'll plan on doing it on Saturday.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds good to me.
So that'll come out on Saturday. So if you're listening to this on Thursday, in a couple of days, on Saturday, a video with our 3 cool preview cards will come out. So that's actually very exciting. I think, I don't want to say anything else. So we got new cards.
Yes, that's all we can say, I think.
That's all we can say, which we've never had before. That's a big deal. Being able to preview new cards is pretty exciting. So I'm looking forward to that video coming out, and then on Monday we'll go into more depth on those cards, where the video we're doing is just basically a quick thing with a preview of the cards, and we're not really delving into what they do or anything like that. So we'll do that for the show that will air on Monday. I think that catches us up, right?
It does.
All right, so should we look at this deck?
Let's do it.
Okay, this was sent to us by listener Mason Talley, and why don't you tell us what he says about his deck, Max?
Yeah, he says his meta spans from casual to semi-competitive in the 8 to 9 range. Most players tend to sit in the 5 to 7 range. The goal of the deck is to get Bobo out as fast as possible and just start chucking lands to deal the damage. This deck can easily win through commander damage as well, though. The deck has a slow early game if he can't get the ramp going. The deck focuses heavily on ramping and less on an early game board presence, which he wants us to look at and see if we can shore that up a bit.
Okay.
There's no budget on cards. If he wants it bad enough, he will work on saving up and getting it.
And Borborygmos is his first deck he ever made. It's been around since he started playing EDH when Gatecrash came out. So it's something that's kind of personal as well. So that's always fun to look at someone's kind of their pet deck that they've had for a long time.
Yeah.
And we have at least one of these in the shop. I don't see it that often, but it's one of those things I play against even just locally, every couple months. And I've seen Bobo in the wild too at different events. So this is a deck that I've played against more than a few times. So I'm able to talk about it a little bit in that regard. Have you played it much, Max? Have you played the one in the shop at all?
No, I don't think I've played against the one in the shop, but I have played against Patrick Sapola's of Commander Time.
Oh, yeah.
Before at like Magic Fest, Minneapolis, or in Vegas. So yeah, it's definitely a fun deck to play against. Can do tons of different things.
Yes, indeed. So Borborygmos Enraged. 4 red, green, so 8 mana for a commander, for a legendary creature Cyclops. He's a 7/6 though. I mean, that's
3 hits.
That's good, but still, 8 mana is a lot. Trample. Whenever Borborygmos Enraged deals combat damage to a player, reveal the top 3 cards of your library. Put all land cards revealed this way into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard. And Bobo also has an ability, discard a land card. Borborygmos Enraged deals 3 damage to target creature or player, but I believe that's been errated to also allow you to hit any target. Is that correct, Max?
That is correct.
So the card reads creature or player, but it's been errated to any target. All right, 42 lands in this deck. So let's talk about those first.
For sure. So we have an Ancient Tomb, Arcane Lighthouse, Blighted Woodland, Cavern of Souls, Cinderglade, Command Beacon, Command Tower, Evolving Wilds, Field of Ruin, 6 forests, 1 Forgotten Cave, 1 Glacial Chasm, a Hanweir Battlements, Kessig Wolf Run, Lotus Field, 8 mountains, 1 Petrified Field, Ripbound Crag, Smoldering Crater, Stomping Ground, Strip Mine, a Taiga, a Tectonic Edge, Temple of Abandon, Thespian Stage, Tranquil Thicket, Valkut the Molten Pinnacle, Vesuva, and Wooded Foothills. And there's also a Dryad Arbor.
All right. Yeah, Dryad Arbor is categorized over under creatures, but that takes us to 42 lands, which in a deck where you're not just using them to ramp, but you're using them offensively when you discard them, Angry Borbo decks tend to almost always be running more than 40 lands. Anything worth talking about here that jumps out at you? Cavern of Souls is kind of, I wouldn't say an odd include. It's basically here I'm guessing it's like a meta call. I'm not sure if he plays a lot of blue or against a lot of blue decks or something, because I'm assuming it's being set to Cyclops to keep the commander from being countered.
Yeah, it has to be doing that, is what I think too.
But I mean, at 8 mana, you really don't want to have your commander get countered. So I mean, if you have a Cavern of Souls, if Cavern of Souls was a $5 card, I think I've mentioned this in the past, I would probably put it in most of my decks just to name either my commander or whatever the most important creature I have in hand. I mean, there's not much downside to it, and other than the price. So,
yeah.
Any ones here you want to talk about that you think you either like or don't like necessarily?
I am not a big fan of Smoldering Crater. It's just a cycling land.
Yep.
It enters tapped. The same can be said for Tranquil Thicket. I get it, they're a draw source. This deck is probably needing some card draw, so I get why they're in here. I think this is a great deck for stuff like Dwarven Mine. It's another mountain that will trigger Valkut, and it'll help with another card I recommend later in the show.
Okay.
And it also makes tokens when it enters the battlefield untapped, so it can be an early game drop.
And lets it give you the chump blocker to kind of, buy a little bit of time. I don't love the cycling lands either. I feel like you really only want them in a deck that can abuse them, and there is a Life from the Loam later on, but I don't know if you're already going to be probably putting so many cards in the graveyard. There's plenty of Life from the Loam targets. I don't know. I just don't know if that's enough synergy to justify the lands coming to play tapped. Maybe it is.
Probably not.
But I feel like it isn't. Yeah. Similarly, Temple of Abandon is fine, but I also feel like I don't know if the scribe matters that much here. I guess it lets you get something out of the way if you want to ensure you're going to draw 3 lands with Bobo. But I just don't know if you need it. coming into play tapped at least. I think there's just too many other options, or it doesn't really impress me.
Yeah.
I've kind of moved away from running the temples. I don't even know if I have any in decks anymore. And it's not that they're bad, it's just like there's just been too many options now.
For sure.
So, since there is so many different lands in this deck and so many lands period, I do think Field of the Dead would be a good include here. And then you can tweak the basics a little bit and run a few snow lands, half and half probably. Even without doing that, you're going to almost always be hitting the threshold to just be making free zombies. But there's just so much land ramp here that I think it's just a really nice piece of value that has almost no downside.
Oh, for sure. And if you do swap those snow lands in, it gives you another ramp spell into the north to play.
Yes.
Just to go get that snow basic.
Yep. And I also kind of like Drownyard Temple here. It's a rare land that was in the Shadows over Innistrad block. Taps for a colorless, doesn't come into play tapped or anything. The one thing about it is, if it's in your graveyard, you can spend 3 mana to return it to the battlefield tapped. Since this is a deck that's just so often pitching lands, it just lets you, if you happen to have, 3 mana and nothing else going on, lets you ramp that land back into play for next turn and use it. There's just no downside in a 2-color deck. You're just probably not going to be that desperate for colors. You can afford a utility land. I think it's got some, decent upside in there. You're not really sacrificing much for it.
Yeah.
Any more that you like or want to talk about here?
I really like seeing Command Beacon here. I know I've talked about this card in the past. I don't have a deck to run it, but I would love to run this card one day just because it's really nice for expensive commanders like Bobo is at 8 mana. Oof.
Because you're still going to have to cast the 8 mana, but there's a big difference between being able to cast the 8 when it's in your hand and having to come up with 14 when it's in the zone.
Yeah.
So this is a good deck for it for sure. That's about it I have for lands. Yes, you could probably turn Evolving Wilds into some, original fetch land that's slightly better most of the time. But that's I'm not sure if it's worth the $30 difference in the cards.
At least a $30 difference.
At least, right. Where should we go next, Max?
How about we go over to the instants, because there are only 5 of them.
Yes. We're looking at Beast Within, Chaos Warp, Crop Rotation, Harrow, and Realms Uncharted. So Beast Within and Chaos Warp you'd expect to see in most decks that can run them, but especially a Gruul deck, because they're just such a nice, versatile pieces of removal. Crop Rotation and Harrow both do a similar thing. They let you sacrifice a land to search your library for a land card and to put it into play. Crop Rotation costs 1, lets you get 1 land. Harrow costs 3, but you can go get 2 lands. So they're both, ways to ramp, go get those Vesuva type lands. The, maybe Field of the Dead if you do put that in the deck. Realms Uncharted is kind of interesting. It's a card you don't see that much. 2 and a green. Search your library for 4 land cards with different names and reveal them. An opponent chooses 2 of the cards. Put the chosen cards into your graveyard and the rest into your hand, then shuffle your library. So especially in this deck, you can almost just not care what they give you because they're basically giving you 6 damage worth of cards.
Yep.
But, that's again not a bad way to go grab that Drownyard Temple. Because when they put it in your graveyard or put it in your hand, it's going to be eventually in your graveyard where you can then re-ramp with it. So this is about a perfect deck, I think, for Realms Uncharted too. Any thoughts from you on any of these instances, Max?
I wasn't sold on Realms Uncharted until you started talking about Drownyard Temple.
Okay.
And then the fact that you're getting 6 damage if you cast this with Bobo out, it makes a lot more sense now. I do have one recommendation.
Yeah.
And it's called Barrow Down. So Kenzan?
Okay.
I think that's how you pronounce it. It's an instant for 2 and a red, and it has the keyword sweep.
And I believe Patrick Cipolla ran this in his Bobo deck, right?
Yes, and it is really fun. So you return any number of mountains you control to their owner's hands. Barrel Down does damage equal to target creature to twice the number of mountains returned this way. So it is a targeted removal spell with some damage implications, but it refills your hand so you can start chucking stuff to Bobo.
It's a great closer when someone's down to 12 or 15 or something, and you just want them dead, and you're not too concerned about losing half your lands in play. It just lets you suicide take that last person out when it's down to you and them or something.
Yes, and that's exactly how I died to this card.
The one other one I might throw out there as a possible include here would be Sprouting Vines, which is 2 and a green. Search your library for a basic land card. Reveal that card and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library, which isn't terribly exciting for 3 mana. However, it has Storm. So when you play the spell, copy it for each spell played before it this turn. And it's not each spell you played. It's each spell played, just period. So even if you cast it, at the end of someone's turn when they've cast one spell, you're spending 3 mana to put 2 lands in hand. It doesn't ramp you, but that's 2 lands in hand that you're going to be able to discard to Bobo next turn. But there's plenty of times, if you really think about it, on turn 7 or something, when somebody casts a spell and somebody casts a spell, and then somebody's like, before the end of your turn, I'm going to blow up, your Soul Ring. And then you cast Rotting Vines and get 4 lands to hand, which is then you can either use them for lands for turn if you happen to have multiple things out to let you play multiple lands a turn, or you can just use them all for cannon fodder off Borborygmos and dome somebody for 12. So it's a card I think that has a lot of upside, and I run it in my Mina and Den deck. And I don't know if I've ever got less than 2 lands, but I've gotten 5 lands multiple times off it before.
Jeez, that's
great 3
value.
Mana you spend. Yeah. And that's like a freak turn when somebody plays a spell trying to bait out a counter spell, and then, the next turn, then they cast their second spell for turn, and someone counters that, and then they respond with something else, and then you're like, I'm just going to cast this, then a turn and draw, 5 lands. But that does happen, like those kind of turns where 4 spells get cast before you get a chance to cast yours. That's not uncommon in Commander.
No, not at all.
That's one I would consider here too for putting a ton of gas into hand for Borborygmos as well. All right, so those are the 5 instants he has. Since we're doing categories with a limited amount of cards, I guess let's jump over to Planeswalkers quick. There's Freyalace, Llanowar's Fury, and Nissa, Vastwood Seer, which I guess is technically a creature, but she is the Nissa that gets you a land when she comes into play, and once you play a land, if you have 7 or more, she flips over into Nissa, Sage Animist. So Freyalace, Llanowar's Fury, she's 5 mana. Her +2 puts a 1/1 green elf druid token onto the battlefield that has tapped at a green mana to your mana pool, so she makes a Llanowar elf. Her -2 destroys an artifact or enchantment, which is always pretty useful, and her -6 draws a card for each green creature you control, which is pretty decent, but in this deck, there's not a ton of creatures. But she does make those tokens, so I guess that's part of it. Flipped Nissa, her +1 reveals the top card of your library, and if it's a land card, it goes into the battlefield, otherwise goes into your hand. Her -2 creates a legendary 4/4 green elemental creature token, and her -7 untaps up to 6 target lands, and they become 6/6 elemental creatures that are still lands. So what do you think of the 2 walkers, Max?
So I get why Flipness is in here just for the ETB on the creature side.
Sure.
And it's a little bit of a card draw engine when it flips.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. I think Freyalace is in here for removal. I think it's all the
Sure.
-2 ability. And I guess since you're not running a lot of other type of removal in this deck, I would rather run something like Nissa Vital Force, to where when you do start getting lands into play and you can alter, you're just drawing cards faster.
Nissa Vital Force is whenever you play a land, you draw a card, and that's on her -6, and she comes into play with 5, I believe.
Yes.
So if you drop her and +1, if she survives basically 1 turn around the board, and you do have a commander who's a 7/6, if she is able to live once around the board, you just are going to alter and have that emblem the rest of the game, which is great. Yeah, I kind of am on board with that. I do think Freyalace is fine. I don't think she's amazing, though.
Yeah, I mean, 5 mana, you -2 Freyalace, so that's 5 mana to remove an artifact or an enchantment.
At sorcery speed.
And then next turn you have to +2 just so if she survives, you
Right.
+2 to make a Llanowar elf, which the deck really isn't running any of those to begin with, so it's
Right.
not for the ramp purpose. And turn 5 isn't early by any means, so this
No.
isn't like an early game strategy.
And her ult is fine as well, but again, it doesn't really do anything in this particular deck that synergizes with anything else.
Right.
And that's of course, the dream situation too, if you get that far, which doesn't happen that often, versus Nissa Vital Force, where it's just 1 turn and you alter. And then it stays there all game doing that effect.
Yep, and people will most likely try to remove Nissa before they try to remove Bobo if they're out at the same time.
Yeah, it's going to buy you. It's going to move focus off your commander for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Nissa Vastwood Seer is a good card. I don't know if I love it here, but I also don't not like it, so I think it's fine. But I agree. I don't know if I would run Freyalace. Where to next?
Should we go over to the sorceries?
Sorceries. Sure. What do we have here?
16 of them. We have Brass's Bounty, Creeping Renaissance, Cultivate, Decimate, Gamble, Green Sun Zenith, Kodama's Reach, Life from the Loam, Nature's Lore, Nissa's Pilgrimage, Rampant Growth, Reforge the Soul, Splendid Reclamation, Sylvan Scrying, Vandal Blast, and Wheel of Fortune.
All right. So what do you think about all these?
That's a lot of ramp.
It is.
Which this deck needs.
Yeah. What do you think about Bress's Bounty at 7 mana? For each land you control, it's 7 mana, so it's 6 and a red for the sorcery. For each land you control, create a colorless treasure artifact token that has sacrifice this artifact and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So presumably by the time you cast it, you're going to have probably 5 lands in play, if not more. But there's not that many artifact ramp things here, so I'm going to guess you're probably going to have 5-ish most of the time. But that's it. It's one and done.
Yep. Yeah, that's kind of my thought is I just went pure on the fact that you're going to have 7 lands in play because there aren't a lot of artifact ramp like you just stated. But, even if if you just have the 7, you're not netting anything.
Right.
They're tokens. They sit there that you're going to use to cast Bobo or something.
You're probably not doing anything extra with those being tokens. They're just...
Nope.
I almost feel like if you want that one big turns burst of mana to do a thing, I feel like Mana Geyser, which is 3 red, and add red to your mana pool for each tapped land your opponents control. I mean, occasionally you're going to be playing control decks or something where no one's got lands tapped, but man, the vast majority of the time Mana Geyser winds up putting, 15 mana into your pool. I think it's cheaper to cast by 2, and it probably has more upside, I would say. Definitely has more upside, I would say. And probably a little bit less downside, too.
Yeah.
Let's say we're going just by the amount of lands you have. So let's say you're going to cast it on turn 5. There's a really good chance that there's 15 lands tapped. People tend to, on turn 5, be trying to get things done. But okay, let's say there's 10 lands tapped. That's still going to be way more mana than Bress's Bounty is going to get you. And it could be way more. So I think if you want that effect, I would much rather go with Mana Geyser.
Yeah, I agree with that.
What else here?
I don't see much else that I don't like in this package. Creeping Renaissance makes sense. It brings back all your lands.
Yeah, Creeping Renaissance is 3 green. Choose a permanent type. Return all those cards of the chosen type from your graveyard to your hand. Ditch a bunch of lands, bounce them all back to your hand. With Creeping Renaissance, pitch them all again. It's a perfect deck for it, and it has flashback, so you can use it again. I mean, it's the ideal deck to run that in, basically.
Yeah. I am shocked to see no Blasphemous Act.
Well, especially in a deck that he says is a little bit slow, being able to cast that board wipe relatively early on when everyone else is raced out in your slow rolling stuff. I tend to agree. Same thing. I feel like I would want to run Blasphemous Act here just to reset the board before you play your commander.
Yeah.
Especially because many times it's going to be 1 mana, wipe the board, drop Bobo.
Oh, yeah. That's the turn you want to have.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I see you in your notes here, you've got Hour of Promise written down. That's kind of a pet card of yours the last couple of years.
Hour of Promise is a card I've really grown to like. It's 5 mana to get any 2 lands from your deck into play tapped. But on turn 5, that gets you your Field of the Dead, or your Valkut, or your Glacial Chasm if you're ready to set up to win that early in the game. It just gets you whatever you need straight into play, tapped. Yeah, but half these cards you're going to grab might come into play tapped anyways. So why not get the 6th and 7th land you need to trigger Field of the Dead? Yeah,
I agree with that completely. So 2 cards I kind of like. I don't know if I'd run both, but they both do a similar thing. The first is Finale of Promise. That's X red. You may cast up to 1 target instant card and up to 1 target sorcery card from your graveyard, each with converted mana cost X or less without paying their mana costs. And if a card cast this way, we put into your graveyard, this turn exile it. If X is 10 or more, copy each of those spells twice, and you may choose new targets for the copy. So, there's a good amount of sorceries in here, and they all tend to interact with the commander and do something that's kind of powerful, whether it's, Wheel of Fortune to refill your hand to give you more things to pitch, or Splendid Reclamation to bring all your lands back, or Creeping Renaissance to bring them all back to your hand. I think it's a decent way basically to reuse your already useful spells that you maybe use to win games. I feel like you're using Creeping Renaissance to win a game, or you're using Wheel of Fortune to get enough lands to kill everyone and win the game, or at least kill one person. This lets you kill multiple people. If you use that to bring back that Creeping Renaissance and cast it again, I guess that one has flashback, but there's enough spells here where you can do that. And if you're able to cast multiple copies of some of these, you're probably looking at a chance to kill the table. Same thing with Mizzix's Mastery, which is a sorcery as well. If you cast it for 4, you can basically flash back an instant or sorcery in your graveyard, but if you overload it at 8, you can cast all the instant sorceries in your graveyard. So again, being able to just in one turn fire off that Cultivate and that Creeping Renaissance and that Nature's Lore and that Rampant Growth and that Wheel of Fortune, and you can launch all of those off in one turn. I like both of those spells, and I think they might do a lot of work here, turning a turn where you could kill one person into a turn where you can kill everybody. It's easy to forget about those because I think people want to run them in blue decks, like a red-blue deck or something, where you're looking at a Spellslinger kind of thing. But I think in this style deck, they're really, really good too, where you're counting on the instant sorceries to load up your hand with the lands to kill people. I think it kind of plays like a blue deck anyway, so I think people overlook those style of cards. I think they can do a lot of work here.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
That's it for me under sorceries. I like the wheels. I like the spells that things like Kodama's Reach and Cultivate that I don't really run much anymore, but they make sense here because they both ramp you and they give you ammo to your hand. Life from the Loam's obviously a great card. So yeah, I like most of the ones that are being ran here for sure. What is next? Should we jump over here to the creatures, Max?
Okie dokie.
Because there's not many. There's only 13. So what do we have here?
We have Avengers Zendikar, Azusa Lost But Seeking, the Dryad Arbor we mentioned earlier, Eternal Witness, Green Warden of Marasa, Null Spine Dragon, Oracle of Moldaya, Raminep Excavator, Sakura Tribe Elder, Scavenging Ooze, Titania Protector of Argoth, Tunneling Geopede, and Yavimaya Elder.
So this creature suite is actually somewhat similar to what I'm running in my Mina and Den deck. That's more of a Lands Matter landfall deck, but your stuff here kind of does a similar thing as well. So this is a relatively familiar creature suite. Anything you want to highlight or talk about briefly here?
I definitely have a couple of ideas for the early game strategy. Something like Tireless Tracker. This is from the Shadows over Innistrad block as well. It's 2 and a green for a human scout that's a 3/2. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, investigate. And then whenever you sacrifice a clue, put a 1/1 counter on Tireless Tracker. So it's a pretty solid body for right away in the game. You're going to be ramping early to get Bobo out, so you're just going to gain some value over time. And people don't really pay attention to clues. So unless a Vandal Blast goes off, I think you're pretty much okay.
And then they're going to sit there until you get to that point in the game where you have surplus mana and need cards in hand. And then you just, before the end of someone's turn, crack 3 clues and draw 3 cards. And you've kind of refilled your hand somewhat for just doing the thing your deck was already going to be doing anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I run that in my Mina and Den deck, and it was obviously a powerhouse in Standard. I think it still sees Modern play, and it would be great here.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Azusa. I understand why it's in this deck for that really explosive early game. Get Azusa out on turn 1, maybe turn 2, pop out 2 more lands, 3 more lands next turn. I feel like you're going to burn through your hand really fast.
Well, the problem with play an extra land each turn things is they don't stack necessarily that well.
Right.
I mean, if you're drawing all the cards in the world, then they stack great, but most of the time you're not drawing that many cards.
This isn't Tatiova.
Right, yes, right. Where totally makes sense. No, here I feel like, and there are, in addition, there's quite a few other play an extra land effects here.
Yes.
And I just don't think I feel like this is a great card. I just don't know if it adds that much value here.
No, and especially because of in the late game, I don't think you don't want to be putting lands on the field. You want to be throwing them to deal 3 damage to your opponents.
Right.
What I would rather replace this with is the Dryad of Elysian Grove from Theros Beyond Depth.
Which is just 1 extra land.
Yep, but all your lands are every basic land type in addition to their other types.
So that helps a lot if you're running quite a few utility lands.
And it helps with your Valkut.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's just another Oracle, essentially.
Right, yes.
And the fact that it does more late game, if you drop this in the late game, at least you have a fixer,
Right. Same mana cost, too. It's a little bit bigger body as well.
Yep.
Yeah, I like that a little bit better, too. I kind of agree.
My final suggestion would be for Green Warden of Marasa. So this is 6 mana, 4 green for a 5/4. When it ETBs, you may return target card from your graveyard to your hand. And when it dies, you may exile it. If you do, return a card from your graveyard to your hand. So you get 2 Eternal Witnesses off of it. One when it enters the battlefield, one when it dies and you have to exile it. That's good. I mean, you can get back, a ramp spell or maybe a creature or an important land. I think the new Multani might just be a better cut here.
Okay.
So Multani, Yavamaya's avatar, 4 green. It has reach and trample, and it gets +1/+1 for each land you control and each land in your graveyard. So it plays into the fact that you want to throw your lands away to deal the damage, and you're just going to fuel this thing as much as you can. And then you can pay 1 into green to return 2 lands you control to their owner's hand, and then you can return Multani from the graveyard to your hand. So it helps getting lands back in your hand as well.
Yeah, I like that one. One more one I would mention here, I'd consider running Rubble Hulk. It's 6 mana, power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control, so pretty often it's going to be just a kind of vanilla beater. But the real power here is the Blood Rush ability for 1 red-green. You can discard it, and target attacking creature gets XX till end of turn, where X is number of lands you control. So it's going to make Bobo ginormous fairly often just because you're going to ramp out enough lands. By the time you cast him, it's probably basically going to double his power and toughness. He has trample, so the damage punches through. It's just gonna shot people pretty often. If they've taken 1 hit and they're like, I can take 1 more, that kills them. Or it's a big beater creature that can get in the way too. I think it's very versatile, and I think this would be a decent deck to run it.
I have died to that card so many times in Armenian and Den deck.
Yeah. Now, I think it's a little bit better there than it would be here. That deck works with it a little bit more maybe than this one does, but I think it will be perfectly fine here too. So
yeah,
it's at least worth looking at. How about we take a look at the enchantment suite? There's 9 of them. We have Abundance, Burgeoning, Exploration, Keen Sense, Rhythm of the Wild, Snake Umbra, Song of the Dryads, Sylvan Library, and Tectonic Reformation. So Burgeoning and Exploration are 1 mana enchantments. Exploration lets you play an additional land on each of your turns, which we talked about how there's quite a few of those effects here. Burgeoning does a similar thing. You can play an additional land whenever an opponent plays a land. They're good here. Again, I think there's probably too many of those effects, but I think the 1 mana enchantment ones that are hard to remove are probably more efficient than the, Azusa, maybe. What do you think?
I would prefer to run both of these over Azusa.
I kind of tend to agree.
Just because late game, they're not going to do anything.
Right.
Where I think people still see Azusa and get scared by it no matter when it gets put down. I
think that's the case.
So, and these don't let you burn your hand out as fast, I think, as a turn 2 Azusa would.
Right. Abundance, kind of a confusing card, 2 green. Instead of drawing a card, you may choose land or non-land and reveal cards from your library until you reveal a card of the chosen kind. That card goes in your hand and the rest go in the bottom of your library in any order. So basically, when you go to draw, you just say, I want to pick a land or a non-land, and you just flip until you get the appropriate thing. In this case, it's going to give you the option to either not get a land if you don't want one, or get the land to guarantee you've got one that you can pitch to ding somebody. Sylvan Library is a great card all on its own anyway, and they work nicely together in that it lets you keep all 3 cards from Sylvan Library, name what they are, and then not take the damage. So Abundance makes sense in this deck just in general. Sylvan Library makes sense in almost any green deck in general, and they work great together. So that's a logical include for both of those cards. In your notes here, Max, I see you didn't necessarily love Keen Sense or Snake Umbra.
That is very true. And then I saw your note that it triggers off the discard too. And Silly Max thought it was a combat damage trigger, not just a damage trigger.
The new Keen Sense version that was in Amonkhet is worded combat to be damage. Yes. But yeah, Keen Sense is worded whenever an enchanted creature deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. Same thing with Snake Umbra, and it's a protection spell. So yeah, for each land, it lets you draw. In addition to if you happen to, pound through with damage off your commander.
So I really like these cards in this deck then.
Okay, all right. That makes sense. Yeah, I like them too. I don't know if it wasn't that specific wording. I don't think it's worth it just for combat damage. But yes, for 1 mana to do that, or 3 in the case of Snake Umbra, but it gives you some protection. I like both those includes. I don't necessarily love Tectonic Reformation here. I like the card in general. It's an enchantment, 1 in a red. Each land card in your hand has cycling for a red, and in itself has cycling too. I think it's a super cool card, but I don't know how often you are going to want to be getting rid of lands to draw versus throwing them in the Bobo.
Yeah, I think this has to be like backup plan of backup plans just to get the draw, like the cards you can't cast. Let's say you do end up with Avenger Zendikar in your opening hand, and you kept a 3-lander. You're like, okay, I can
Sure.
get there, and you don't.
And I feel like in that case, I would rather still just maybe run Light at the Stage or something just to get some cards into my hand, period, versus this. I think it's a sweet card. I just don't know if this is the deck for it. I think I'd just rather get bulk cards in hand.
Yeah.
Song of the Dryad is a great removal spell. Works on a whole lot of different targets. I like that as well. Rhythm of the Wild gives you your creatures haste, at least non-token creatures, because they have Riot, and it keeps your stuff from getting countered, which we've seen a couple different things to do that in this deck, so I think that's a pretty solid card as well.
Yep.
Anything you'd add here?
No, nothing really. My notes were
Okay.
to take out the 2 auras, and obviously I was wrong, so...
All right. How about artifacts? What do we have here, Max?
We have 14 artifacts. So we have Basalt Monolith, Crucible Worlds, Expedition Map, Grafted Exoskeleton, Gruul Signet, Horn of Greed, Illusionist Bracers, Mana Crypt Memory Jar, Oblivion Stone, Rings of Brighthearth, Sensei's Divining Top, Storm Cauldron, and Swiftfoot Boots.
Anything you like or dislike there?
I don't like Horn of Greed. I don't
Okay.
like helping my opponents.
Horn of Greed, 3 mana. Whenever any player plays a land, that player draws a card. Yeah, I don't love it. I feel like it's the kind of card that you run in a deck when you don't have better ways to take advantage of getting cards in the hand or lands doing a thing for you. I don't think this deck maybe necessarily needs it.
No, I don't know. I think it needs it to a point, but I think if this could easily just be another 2-mana ramp spell or a 3-mana
Sure.
ramp spell at sorcery speed to put lands onto the battlefield or put them into your hand or something like that.
Sure, I kind of agree with that. I'll say, yeah, I'm not a huge fan. I think there's better options here as well. There's no Soul Ring in this deck. Did you notice that?
I did. It's interesting because Bobo does have 4 colorless in his cost. I feel like I would run it.
I feel like I would too. There are situations I can buy. I mean, Chris has talked about not running Soul Ring before. I think Erin Campbell mentioned it too when we had her on. I feel like you still want to run it 99% of the time, and I think this is a deck where you want to run it. I would have it in here. I think
There is a Mana Crypt,
there is,
so maybe that's what he's running instead.
and there's a Gruul Signet. I just feel like I would rather have it than the Gruul Signet. By the time you get to the point where you can cast Bobo, you probably have your double red and your double green, and Soul Ring gets you there faster. I think I would run it, I think.
Yeah, I would too.
Okay. What else?
I really like Grafted Exoskeleton because that,
Yeah.
Keen Sense helps with throwing your lands away.
Yep. And I had it as a footnote. We didn't mention it under sorceries, but this is probably not a bad deck for Triumph for the Hordes either. There's not a ton of creatures here necessarily, but just giving Bobo, spending the 5 mana to give Bobo Infect with Triumph, that then makes him an 8/7 swing through. You're probably going to deal a couple of Infect damage to somebody, if not all 8, and then you're 1 land away from killing him.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's, as a 5 mana kill target player spell, which is going to be most of the time, that's probably worth it.
Oh, for sure.
So we didn't. I meant to mention under sorceries and we didn't, but Memory Jar gives one more wheel effect here. Makes sense. Expedition Map, I don't necessarily always like in non-green decks, but it goes and gets Vesuva. It gets things to copy Vesuva. Glacial Chasm if you need it. Keswick Wolf Run to maybe go kill somebody. So I think that can make sense here. Oblivion Stone, you're looking at wanting to wipe the board and destroy multiple things. I think I can see that as well, so that makes sense. Divining Top's never bad. Rings of Brighthearth copies Bobo's ability. That makes sense. Storm Cauldron, 5 mana. During each player's turn, that player may put an additional land into play, and whenever a land is tapped for mana, bounce it to the owner's hand.
I love this card.
In this deck especially, it's a really, really solid card.
Let's go back to Rings of Brighthearth.
Okay.
It copies Bobo's ability. Great. But there's also an infinite mana combo in this deck between Basalt Monolith and Rings of Brighthearth.
Yes. But I don't know what you're using it for.
I don't either until you just, recommended Mizzix Mastery and Finale of Promise.
Oh, sure.
Those would be great infinite mana sinks.
And do we know, is that even an intentional infinite mana combo, or is it just that there happens to be Basalt Monolith and...
I think it's in here just to help get... Basalt Monolith is in here just to get Bobo out.
Okay.
And the, rings trigger
To copy the pitch
the
with
Bobo
Bobo.
effect.
Okay.
Yeah. That'd be my guess.
Okay. Swiftfoot Boots over Greaves, I would guess, just because there's stuff in here that does target Bobo.
Yep.
One card in your notes that I think would be a great include, Black Blade Reforged, Max.
Oh, it's so good. Especially if, like Mason said, he does win with commander damage. This will just make it so much easier.
It's a great backup plan. And plenty of times it puts them on a one-shot clock. But if they've already taken Bobo damage earlier in the game, and they're like, well, I'll take that 6, or take that 7, or they chum block and they take 5, and they're like, okay, well, now I can take 3 hits and I'm fine. Then also they just get killed.
Right.
You drop Black Blade, equiplet, swing at them, and they get domed for 19 trample damage. They're like, oh well, I'll soak up 3 of it and I die. So yeah, I agree. It's a really good backup plan here as well. That's really all I have. This is a pretty decent deck, and it looks like what I would expect to see from a Bobo deck.
Yeah, same here. I love seeing Bobo decks. They put a timer on the game, so.
And they play differently than most decks that you see.
Yep.
Someone getting lands to hand the pitch them is a strategy that is really different than anything else out there, but it's also difficult to deal with.
Yeah, very true. Unlike the other kind of gruel giants like Rurik Thar or something like that, this is much more fun to play against and to probably pilot if you do build this kind of deck.
Yeah, I think so. I tend to agree. All right. I think that is going to do it for this show. Mason, thank you very much for sharing this deck with us, and thank you very much for supporting us on Patreon. It really does mean a lot. Max is wearing some pants right now, I believe. No, you're not. Who am I kidding? It's 10 o'clock. We're recording this on a Tuesday.
You'll never know.
You're working from home now, so you've just gotten rid of all of your pants.
Pretty much.
But yes, Mason, thank you for supporting us. Thank you to all our Patreon supporters. It is a big deal. It means a lot. I am Dana. You can find me on Twitter at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDRCentral_Max, and you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. Our show is edited by Rafael Garcia. You can find him on the Twitter birds at Ursa Bearwalker. And our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod. We will be back on Monday to take a more in-depth look at the special preview cards we got from Commander 2020. Until then, I'm Dana.
And I'm Max.